Hello, everyone. Good evening. We'd like to start our event tonight with an opening prayer by Sister May Cano from the Diocese of Kalookan.
Let's acknowledge the presence of God. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving God, we praise and thank you for the gift of time and life you have given to each one of us. Thank you for this opportunity as we gather for the online launching of the book Triggered, prepared by the creative team behind the Triggered anthology book. We are grateful for the support of the Ateneo professors, students, and all those who have been part of this book, which will support the studies of the EJK students. May our Lord bless us as we continue our partnerships in mission and in serving the poorest of the poor. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
All right, thank you, Sister May. So good evening, everyone. So my name is Jamie Bautista. So I am your host for tonight, and I'm also the publisher of the book and as well one of the contributors to this book that we are launching tonight. So welcome to the online launch of Triggered, the creative responses to the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. So this is a book published by Chambershell Publishing. So this is an anthology of stories and writings, that has been a labor of love and passion for all of us here who worked on this for the past 4 years, and we were so happy to finally see it come to fruition, to see it come together in print form. Now, this book is a collection of 12 pieces with 6 stories written by then students and now graduate writers, and with 6 literary responses written by professional writers who were tasked with mentoring these student writers. So each story was then illustrated by talented artists who also believed in this cause. So all of the writings are responses to the horrifying issue of the extrajudicial killings that are happening here in the Philippines due to the drug war from this current administration. So for all of us who are part of this project, thank you so much for coming, sharing this night with us. When we did this project, we didn't want to simply express our confusion, our sadness and anger, but we wanted to use our art to also be of service to those affected by this issue. And because of that, all the proceeds of this book will be going to the EJK Orphans Project by the Diocese of Kalookan, which is headed by Sister May Cano, who just, as you saw earlier, did our opening prayer for us. To tell you guys more about what this unique project's all about, how it came together, I'd like to call on one of the co-editors of the book, Joyce Martin. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Jamie. Thank you for this introduction. So I wanted just to tell you how the whole thing started. So it started with sort of despair, actually, after the killing of Kian de los Santos last August 16, 2017. As you know, he was dragged into a corner and gunned down, mistaken for a drug addict at that time. And he was caught. This was caught in CCTV. And so it put into doubt the credibility of the president's so-called war on drugs since 2016. So it made this death, made an impact on me as a teacher and as a human being. And I found myself asking, what could a simple civilian do? Because I was not a lawyer or I couldn't go out into the streets by myself, at least. But staying silent was really not an option. And I remembered how, my background is memory and trauma studies and literature. And I was thinking of Shakespeare's line referring to his sonnet when he says, "So long lives this on paper, and this gives life to thee." It prolongs the life of that person. So I was asking myself, what if the interrupted lives of the Kians and all the other children, who are now over 200 of them dead today, what if they could be prolonged even just through a poem or literature on a page? How could fiction writing lend a life to the disappeared? And I was convinced of fiction's role in mourning, empathy, and the imagination of new worlds. And in particular, I was curious on how my freshman students at that time, 16 to 18 years old, very close to the age of Cyan, how would they themselves respond to such deaths, especially, they were very close to the age of Cyan. So I challenged my first year students to express themselves through short story writing, if they so wished, to imagine what if they could prolong this life on a page. And I was really impressed because I received around 20 pieces at that time, and around the 20, I gathered the 6 ones, the best ones, who would also accept to go to all this 4 years, actually, what took us 4 years to do. And I toyed around the idea, what if they could be published, because I was really touched by my students' creativity, empathy, and sense of justice in those pieces. But I knew how difficult it is to publish, especially for young people. But anyway, I sought the help of a colleague writer, Cyan Abad-Jugo, who is really a seasoned and expert writer on young adult fiction. And she was equally impressed by those stories. And so we started collaborating with the talented freshmen at that time in 2017, whom you will meet in a little while. And I would like to specify that none of them were literature majors. So this really is such a big hope also for all of us. And the next decisive step was our meeting in February 2018 with Katarina Bolasco, who is the head of the Ateneo de Manila University Press. So we did bring these pieces to the press, and she was the one who had the idea of suggesting writer mentors for each student and graphic illustrations to accompany the pages of this future young adult fiction collection. And so we benefited from Cyan's wide web of creative writers and mentors, some of whom who are here. And then at that time, it caught the attention of Martin Villanueva, who was the head of Ateneo's art hub, the Areté, who is responsible for this launch this evening. And so from Project Voyager, which was the backdrop of our room in the Areté at that time. Areté, by the way, for those who do not know, is this big art hub in Ateneo. And it went to EJK Young Adult Fiction. We were able to get a sandbox residency with the Areté. And this residency gave us, our student writers and all of us, several opportunities to widen the empathy and creativity skills, which will be explained later by Cyan. And so this project now is this collection, very special collection that took us 4 years, with a process and experience of production that is really an experience of mutual mentoring, the peer process, the dialogue with actors, with social actors, the social cultural activities that it has literally triggered, and this foundational empathy for those who have died from this drug war, and this beautiful opening that we now, and cooperation we now have with the EJK orphans in the Diocese of Kalookan. I recognize Sister May's presence among us right now, and yeah, thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Joyce. This, as she said, this was a very meaningful project for us, something that we worked on, for again over the past 4 years, and we're so excited that it's finally, coming to be, coming to reality. So I'm really proud I'm very excited to introduce to all of you guys the 12 stories that are featured in this collection. We'd like to also share with you all the artwork done by the very talented illustrator. So here, I want to give recognition to the writers, the mentors, and illustrators of this book. So first off, the first story in the collection is Patintero, written by Samantha Chiu, and here you see it's illustrated by Jewel Tan. The next piece is Tumbang Preso, which is a response by her mentor Cyan Abad-Jugo and illustrated by Patmay De Vera. The next story is Into the Night, which is written by Amiel Deuna and illustrated by Ara Villena. The response by Amiel's mentor is Sestina for Street Side Sorrow, written by Carlomar Dawana and illustrated by M.A. Bungay. Our next story is Control, written by Patricia Narvasa and illustrated also by Patmay De Vera. The response to that is What Damage, written by Christine Lau and illustrated by Jewel Tan. The next story is September 28, written by Red Nadela and illustrated by Andoy Man. The response to that was Marcos, Duterte, and the Irredeemable Political Class, written by Glenn Diaz and with an image by Nikolai Maverick. The next story is Baptism by Fire, written by Jan Ong and illustrated by Crisostomo D. The response to that was Angel of Shadows by Exi Abola, illustrated by John Idago. Next, we have Self-Proclaimed Hero by Katarina Rodriguez with an illustration by an anonymous artist. And finally, we have The Life Penalty, written by me, Jamie Bautista, with an illustration by Arnold Are. Right, so those are the stories we have featured in the book. The artwork is really beautiful. The stories are really gripping. So but at the heart of this are again the 6 stories written by the then student authors who are now graduates. They graduated from the Ateneo this past October, and we're so fortunate they're here with us tonight. So let's. I'd like to talk to some of them to find out, what it was like coming up with these stories, being part of this project. So, let's talk to some of them and see what this whole experience was like. So first off, I'd like to talk to Sam Chiu. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Jamie.
So Sam, tell us a little bit. How did you come up with your story, Patintero? What was the thinking? What inspired you to come up with that idea? Tell us a little bit about the story, also.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so thank you for your question. First and foremost, for me, it was really about sharing the gravity of the situation. So, as Ma'am Martin was saying, it was during the time when he and De Los Santos passed away, and there was a lot more news coming up, and you're just really surrounded with all the things happening. And back then we were students, we were teenagers, and you somehow feel lost in everything. And knowing about Kian's stories, someone so close to our age that time, there was just a lot of emotions. So it became a matter of sharing as well my own sentiments that perhaps reflected others who were just as frustrated, helpless, angry, confused, and grieving. So I just wanted to embody all those with the concept of my story. And that concept came in the form of a game, where there are those in power who manipulate behind the scenes, giving all these orders that we do not really know why or where or for what purpose or how it occurs. And the seemingly removedness of their actions from the reality of the lives that it impacts, lives of people with stories, lives of people who are loved and just as important and precious to others. So Patintero, the story of that game that came first thing in my mind. It's so deeply embedded into the Filipino culture. It's something that I played as a game as well when I was younger. And it was a game where, we have this set of people who catch, and there are this others who run away. And the running of this contrasting roles was somehow reflected in the reality I was seeing around me. We had these cops who were targeting people, and then we have these drug abusers supposedly, and the innocent lives just thrown into all these atrocities that were happening to those who really had the least power to protect themselves. So, it was a forceful play of a game that resulted in countless nameless or named deaths. That was just a matter of telling that story. And I ended up choosing a perspective of a child, someone who was unquestionably innocent, one with so much promise and a life ahead of her. And how that life suddenly gets thrown into that game. So overall, I don't want to really spoil. I hope that everyone, might be teased and excited with that kind of premise. But it was really a matter of just putting together that story now and all those feelings, those sentiments into a story of a child's perspective of the game Patintero that mirrors larger games at play by those with seats and weapons of power. So yeah, in a nutshell, that was the thought process.
Yeah, with your story, it's a very powerful metaphor, and I think you executed that story really well. When you were in Joyce's class, so the option given to you guys was you can either analyze an existing story, or you could come up with your own. So what made you decide that you wanted to do your own story instead?
Okay, thanks for the question again, Jamie. I'll give a little bit of a background of me. So I've always loved stories as a child. I was one of those kids who loved going to the bookstore, and I would just, back then it was it was very free access to books. I could just grab a book and then sit down and just read, very, very exciting to learn all these new things. I remember reading through all the series of alamats of different kinds of beginnings in the Filipino culture. It was really just very, very entertaining as a child, and just to imagine all these things happening. And that also manifested and led on to my journey of enjoying crafting my own stories, from playing make-believe with my brothers and my cousins to I had this thing when my younger years in school, when my friends and we would write stories in their notebooks and then we would exchange them. So it was very fun, getting to see people enjoy as well with the things that you just came up with, and then hearing from them how you can write better or what they didn't really like. So over the years, I grew this passion of writing, but it was more hidden, yet even if it was something I enjoyed, you sometimes think that it's not that good, or it's not really something worth reading for others to see. So naturally, when the time came that Ma'am Martin brought it up during our literature class, we had this option to write a critique paper or to write a short story. It was a no-brainer, for me to really write one. And like what I mentioned earlier, it was really also about PJK that I was just compelled to write about, and also writing a story, the thought of writing a story and being able to pour my thoughts, my feelings, everything unsaid into something concrete was just something that I wanted to do. I felt that I needed in a way also. And so it was also an avenue for me to try to make sense of what didn't really make sense around me. So yeah.
So I'm really glad that you got this opportunity, to be able to flex your creative muscles, to learn how to write stories, and that we can get your story out into the world. So as a treat for everyone, what we're going to do tonight is we have a clip of you actually reading. This is from a couple of years ago, of you reading an excerpt from your story. So hopefully not much spoilers, but so here's Sam reading an excerpt from her story, Patintero.
The part I'll be reading is from one of the first scenes in the story, and yeah. So what happens is that the story starts off with Hope, the main character, playing Patintero, and then she wins. So what happens after is that Tony, the person she's playing, who she played with and who lost to her, So Tony turned around with a bewildered look on his face. His mouth opened and closed, like the newly caught fish in the wet market gasping for air, she thought, and giggled. Tony, a fish. She couldn't help but laugh out loud at the thought. Tony was too preoccupied with his defeat to hear the laughter. He didn't think he would lose against Hope when he challenged her to a game of Patintero this afternoon. Hope is our queen of Patintero, Tony. You didn't stand a chance. Mario, Hope's playmate and classmate at Rizal Elementary School, said as he approached the still stunned Tony. She's small but feisty, our undefeated Patintero champion. You should be honored that you got to play with her, Mario continued as he gave the losing guy a pat on the back. Mario then proceeded to look over where Hope was and gave her a wink, which made her cheeks turn red. Mario didn't catch the way that Hope's face turned into a tomato, nor did he notice how she was always shy around him. Nevertheless, the win in Mario's praise made her day. As the sun began to set on the horizon, Hope's smile was permanently pasted on her face. This day has got to be the best day ever, she thought as she waved farewell to her playmates and headed home. It was time for dinner.
All right, so that was Sam reading an excerpt from her story, Patintero. So the next story that we have in the collection is Into the Night by Amiel Deuna. Now, Amiel couldn't make it sadly tonight, but he did send to me some answers to some questions that we gave him. So I'd like to read out his answers. So we asked him how he came up with the idea for his story. So he said, when our class received the prompt from Ma'am Joyce to create a story, the first thing I did was to research about events related to extrajudicial killings. I wanted to understand how these EJK raids worked and how these have affected not only the victims, but also the general public. One of the more popular raids was about a large drug raid in Tondo, Manila. And I realized that most of the news articles talked about the policeman's actions and the suspected drug dealers. Reading these stories opened my eyes to the content angles that were created to portray these events. Although the articles showed that there were suspected drug dealers who were just victims of the policeman's actions, the stories did not highlight the other victims of these drug raids, the families of these suspected dealers. This made me curious. What actually happened to the families who had lost their loved ones because of these drug raids? I wanted to encapsulate a content angle that wasn't focused on the point of view of the policeman nor of the suspected victim, but rather on the experiences of someone who is on the sidelines, like the victim's sibling. I wanted to show through my short story that although the suspected drug dealers would have had a tough road ahead of them, it'll be tougher for those they've left behind, especially the children. With these ideas in my mind, I was able to write Into the Night through the eyes of Mel, and I hope that through my short story, I was able to give a different perspective on these extrajudicial raids. So when we asked him, how did your parents, friends, and such react to his story being published? He said that the general reaction of my parents and friends were excitement and anticipation. Getting your story published isn't an everyday experience, so they were just so thrilled to know about this opportunity. Of course, there were some friends and family members who raised concerns about publishing a story on extrajudicial killings. However, I assured them that getting my story published is something that I always wanted to experience. Not only will my short story be published, but I will also be able to contribute to the pressing issue of our country. I consider this story as a way to make my voice heard, and just knowing that there may be people out there reading Into the Night already makes me feel that I've achieved my goal of having my voice heard by others. Overall, my circle of friends and family really support this book launch, and I am happy to share it not only to those who are close to me, but also to other people. So let's also share an excerpt of Into the Night. It's read by Amiel.
The downpour finally stopped as Melody gazed through the small window of their family's bedroom at the gloomy evening clouds. Water still dripped from the edges of the house's roof, so she tried to reach out to the small globes of water. To her dismay, she couldn't reach the droplets as they were just a few inches short from her fingertips. She slowly turned her head to glance at the muddy ground. The droplets formed a small puddle that showed her reflection. Seeing her milky white and her long, black hair, the figure turned distorted as the droplets rippled the puddle. This shocked her for a short while, but then she immediately laughed as she continuously watched the rippling of the water. The wavelets slowly stopped and she quickly lifted her head to gaze at the gleaming stars of the sky. They shined bright amidst the the velvet black sky, and she ended up staring at the light, thinking if she could reach it. Aling Nena's sari-sari store is pretty popular among the people in their neighborhood. Usually at around that time, a lot of people, from small kids who want to buy candy to middle-aged men buying beer while gambling, would stop by and just stay there until it would get late at night. Two small tables were set up in front of the store, and one of the tables was occupied by a few men who were just drinking beer while listening to the radio. The other table, however, was used by three women gossiping about anything they could see. Their voices were so loud that Melody could hear almost every insult that they made towards the drunk men. As the two siblings passed by the tables, Mel saw the glaring eyes of the women. However, she immediately dismissed it as she continued to the store's front. While Alfred was conversing with Aling Nena, Melody overheard what was being broadcasted over the radio. Babala sa mga taga-Tondo, ngayong gabi, maaari magkaroon ng raid sa mga kalsada sa Tondo upang hanapin ang mga drug pushers sa Manila, the newscaster reported. This caused a sudden commotion by the people on the tables. The drunk men kept on shouting random rants about the current government, while the women started to gossip about the possible raid. Melody, out of confusion, didn't know how to respond. Instead, she ended up to continue to listen to the women's conversations.
All right, so that was Amiel reading from his story Into the Night. So next up, we have our next student, now graduate author, Patricia Narvasa, who wrote Control. Hi, Pat.
Hi. So
yeah, Pat. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you came up with the idea for it.
okay, thank you for the question. So by the time that I wrote the story in 2017, we already know that there had been hundreds, if not thousands, of EJK victims. And a lot of them were actually kids. And one of them, as we know, was Tion. And it is alarming that when we look at the demographics of these victims, a lot of them were from the lower classes. That's why a good number of articles online call these extrajudicial killings a war on the poor. It is because they are the ones who are disproportionately affected. We also know that with EJK, the dead are not the only victims of these crimes. The families are also victims. Families that lost their fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters, their breadwinners and caretakers. These families and all the people that were left behind are just as much, or if not, greater victims of EJK. I actually started off my story with a shooting scene. And from there, the life of the main character, which is a young girl, changes dramatically. When we talk about children dying too young, we often talk about the great things that they could have done for our world. I was going off this cliche idea that the youth is the hope for our future. So from this shooting scene, our main character lives on, but part of her had died. Experiencing a traumatic event so young in life, you never know what that will do to a young person. And instead of having a success story, I went the opposite direction, and what I think is a more realistic direction. I wanted to highlight the systemic injustice in our country and how many people will lack the resources to get help and do well after these traumatic events. And sometimes they just lack the control to turn their lives around into the right direction. I also wanted to highlight in my story that there's a cycle into this. The trauma is passed on to the other. And within this trauma, it also portrays this complexity of human life. You cannot just simplify their whole being. They aren't just drug users or pushers. They are still people. And their lives will always matter. And at times, the victims are simply collateral damage in this war on drugs. And even if they are drug users and pushers, what gives anyone the right to take lives? We need more empathy in this world, and we need to understand why they do what they do and why they go through this. Killing doesn't end the problem, it just ends a life. So I wanted to show that the society that survives these murders and these injustices are the ones that will have to pay the highest price.
Yeah, your story is really fantastic. The way you had, it's some sort of surreal where you have the main character almost seeing themselves as a separate being from a different perspective. Also, one of the big things about our project is the mentorship. And can you tell us a little bit what it was like meeting your mentor, Tin, and how the mentorship process helped you in writing your story?
I actually really struggled a lot with revising my story. I felt like it could have gone in so many ways, and I had so many different ideas that I didn't know how to put in. And from the original story, it changed quite a bit, even the genre from what everyone thought it was gonna be. So it was actually very reassuring to know that Mamtin was always there when I needed advice about where to take my story. She really helped me streamline my ideas to make it easier to write. And it was always comforting to know that I would have her input and a second eye to look at my story and make editing easier. And also interesting when I met with Mamtin, I learned that my lolo was the professor of Mamtin's dad in law school, and they later became really good friends. So in my bio, I actually wrote about how important my lolo is to me and how he serves as one of my greatest inspirations. And it was a nice reminder of his presence in my life. And it was a delightful coincidence and connection to have with a mentor.
Right, that's an amazing coincidence. So of course we have to give props to Miss Tin Lau, who's here also at the launch now. So Tin, thank you so much for being part of this project, for helping Pat with her story. So now let's have show a clip of you, Pat, reading a little bit from your story of Control.
I remember that week like it was yesterday. I was 5 years old and I was starting to understand people and their actions. I was 5 and eager to learn about the world, but instead that curiosity was replaced by fear. Not by monsters hiding under my bed or villains from fairy tales, but from the reality I lived in. At 5 years old, I learned the world I lived in was one filled with many horrors, monsters that are created by people. Fear, it is not something that I could forget. It was the way my parents exchanged glances, the way Papa cursed under their breath, the watery eyes of Mama, that fake smile they always wore. They were so afraid that something was going to happen. They were always looking over their shoulders and telling me to stay close to them. They were being overly cautious. Eventually, I too learned that you can never be too careful if you have something to be afraid of. I overheard Lolo and Lola talking about something Papa did, but I didn't understand what was happening. All I knew was that there was something very wrong. Then that fateful day came. I was playing with my dolls when all of a sudden, my world came crashing down on me. It was utter chaos. I remember a man coming in and then, bang, bang, bang. Just like falling asleep, everything faded to black. It felt like falling asleep, but I know I died that day. I died and nothing was ever the same again. I know I died, but I woke up the very next day. I should have been in heaven with Papa Jesus and Mama Mary. But instead, I woke up and it felt like hell. It still does. I woke up no longer in control of my body. Instead, I woke up watching myself. I was hearing my thoughts. I was feeling my emotions. It was all me, but I was no longer capable of doing anything. I was no longer in control. My thoughts, my actions, and my feelings were no longer mine. I was no longer myself, yet I was stuck with her, watching her live the life that I should have lived.
All right, so that was Pat Narvasa reading from her story, Control. All right. So guys, before we move on to the rest of our authors, we want to acknowledge Areté, the Ateneo's Creative Hub, again for sponsoring and for hosting our launch tonight. But also not just for that, but also for taking our project, on as part of their sandbox residency, as Joyce mentioned earlier. And it allowed us to interact with many other activities and many other programs also there, which were part of the Areté. So I'd like to invite the co-editor of the book, Cyan Abad-Jugo, to tell us a little bit more about these activities, and how they expanded our project to become something beyond simply being a collection of stories. Hey, Cyan, can you tell us a little bit about the process we all went through the last few years at Areté?
Okay, hi. Good evening, Jamie, and good evening, everyone. It has been 4 years since Joyce approached me with a short fiction of her students. I can't believe they've graduated already. At that time, all we had in mind was the publication of a book where YA, young adults, wrote YA, young adult literature. But after hearing what Karina Velasco of the Ateneo Press had to say, It also became a mentorship project, as you mentioned. Each young student writer would be paired with a practicing, published, not necessarily old writer. Okay, so Glenn Diaz is still very young, you know. Okay, I mentioned Glenn because, you know, I was the one tasked by Joyce to choose the mentors. And of course, I first turned to my writer friends in Ateneo and in UP. But Glenn was going to Australia and he mentored from there. The mentoring in itself was an offshoot activity of the book. And when my boss then, Martin Villanueva, heard of it, he introduced us to Areté's Sandbox Residency. The residency gave us several opportunities to meet with other Sandbox residents working on their own projects, as well as provided us with the venue for our own meetings and conversations. So I think everyone has seen some of the clips of our student writers reading. Our favorite meeting room was the one with a wall mural. So you might have noticed the wall mural behind them. The word Voyager was written large upon it. We took it to mean our group. We were on a voyage to find our own voices and to join them with other voices. In protest against the extrajudicial killings running rampant in our country. One of the key ideas we had was not really to speak for others as if we knew what was best, but to find empathy with the victims and their families. Areté then connected us with the indefatigable actor, director, and teacher of the Fine Arts Department, Missy Mara, who gave us a workshop on improv called Improving Empathy. The workshop ran us through several activities where we had to put shyness aside. Can you imagine me and Joyce acting? We had to put shyness aside and to put ourselves in the shoes of other people, imagining their actions and emotions and how to express these through movement. It was there in that workshop where we met with other people outside of our circle, but who had also their own questions and stories about the war on drugs. It was also there where we found Exi Abola, and soon after that, we asked him to join in our cause as a mentor. The other memorable activity that we had was what we called our FGD, where we exposed our drafts to other people. Guelan Luarca, a playwright and teacher of the Fine Arts Department, Gino Trinidad and Nino Laviste from the Political Science Department, and John Neri, journalist and teacher of the Communications Department. So we showed our drafts to them with fear and trembling. This was moderated by Martin Villanueva, who asked us some very tough questions about our goals and intentions. And it was also here where I feel we really also came to terms with our own belief system and values. This activity was particularly memorable to me because of the faces I saw around me. The response from the panel was very enthusiastic, and our political science teachers wanted to try it out in their classes too. The earnestness and drive and honesty of our young writers, you heard some of them right now, and you heard their passion. The equally passionate passion of Jamie Bautista, the motherly encouragement of Tin Lao. I felt so moved by them. So in that FGD, I looked around and I saw all of them. And that was when I truly felt the pressure of pursuing this project to the end. There were other activities after that. One of our mentors, Carlomar Deuna, had his fine arts classes curate an art exhibit based on the stories of our young writers. We also had a filming with Yellow Sun Studio so that we could preserve our own memories of the process of writing and mentoring. So the clips were filmed by Yellow Sun Studio. And so it has been 4 long years, very long, but also fruitful years. We were slow, admittedly, but we kept at it within our little community, buoyed by the energy of the young. And now we have this book. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much, Cyan. Yeah, so it has been a very long journey, but as Cyan showed, the past 3-4 years was not just us, sitting down, writing, editing. Again, the beauty I think of this whole project was that it put us, the mentors, the student authors, also the editors. We also learned a lot from each other because of all these different activities we did, discussions. Myself as a participant, I really was surprised by how much the project grew and grew over the years. So I think in a way the fact that it didn't just finish in a few months worked to its advantage, and now it became something greater than what it was originally conceived as. So let's meet a few more of our student authors. Unfortunately, I think 2 of them couldn't make it, haven't been able to make it. But what we can do instead is we can share clips of them reading their stories. So let's see. Next up, we have September 28th by Red Nadela. So Red's story is some sort of alternate history type of story, So let's have a clip of Red reading from September 28th.
We approached each other for a hug, and we shook hands after. I said sorry for threatening him, and he said sorry that I felt I was being alienated. He said he meant no personal disrespect on my father, and he never intended for that to be the effect. We almost left that house as better people. Almost. From some distance behind Carlo, I see my dad standing on the stairs, in his hand the other gun. The last 5 seconds kept replaying what I wanted to happen, as if on loop. 1 second in, I spot my dad raise his gun. I stare back at Carlo. 2 seconds in, I point to my dad and Carlo turns around. 3 seconds in, my dad fires the gun. 4 seconds in, I push Carlo out of harm's way. 5 seconds in, the bullet hits me. None of that happened. I stood motionless, I was scared, I was shocked. My dad shot Carlo right in front of me.
All right, so that's a very gripping excerpt from Red's story, September 28th, which if you get to read it, it's sort of a what if a particular figure from history was, displaced in history. What would their perspective on the whole drug war be like? Next, we have an excerpt of Baptism by Fire, read by its author, Jan Ong.
I passed by the narrow, crowded street where the dim lamppost flickered. The waning light illuminated half my face. The street continued to remain busy in spite of the murmurs of the latest tragedy, where a boy was found dead by a sari-sari store. Parents shrieked at their children to go back inside their tiny tin dwellings as a blanket of fear clouded the area. The strong wind shoved me around as I walked aimlessly in the maelstrom. The air had a certain heaviness to it, its gravity crashing down. I could feel the chaos encapsulating me as I walked home after the fleeting colors of the sun faded. Anyone could tell that by the dark circles under my eyes and the growing wrinkles in my forehead that this wasn't how I imagined change to come. I opened the tin door of our house ever so slowly. My wife, who was sitting by the dining table, stood up abruptly at the door's squeaking sound and gazed at me. It seemed like she had been waiting for me all night. I swiftly looked away, avoiding eye contact, and began making my way to the dining table in slow and painful strides. My heavy footsteps made a muddy trail from the door to the hall. I sat across her while she waited for a few seconds before taking her seat again. For a moment, we sat there in silence while the world beyond us went on.
So that was Jan Ong reading from her story. Baptism by Fire, which is a very interesting story. It's done from the perspective, the point of view of a police officer. So trying to, it makes the reader go into the mind of what is it like for someone, a police officer, who's part of, this whole war on drugs. I think one of the things that me, Joyce, and Cyan, one thing we loved about this collection of stories is that it really forces the reader to put themselves into the shoes of different players, different stakeholders, different people affected by this whole war on drugs with the issue of extrajudicial killings. It's not just us preaching this is wrong, but it's also trying to understand people from the other side. In line with that, so I'd also like to talk to our last student author, who I know I'm pretty biased. I know her pretty well because she's my mentee. So I'd like to call on Kat Rodriguez. Hi, Kat. So, of course, Kat, I know a lot about your story because, of course, you and I, we've been working this story for the past 4 years. But can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came up with the idea for it?
Okay. Like you mentioned earlier, Jamie, we had the choice between choosing to analyze a story or choosing to write our own story. Okay, I'm sorry. Initially, I chose to analyze a story. And I think it was just a couple days before the deadline that I decided to read the story that I was supposed to analyze. You can tell I'm not very studious as a student before, but I read the story and I couldn't understand it. So I started panicking. And so I was like, oh, frick, okay, I gotta write a story. I'll write. And my course in college was diplomacy in international relations. So there were a lot of political science classes there. So I had a good background on extrajudicial killings and like the political aspect of it. And so I thought, okay, yeah, I could totally write this story. And I also did creative writing in high school. So I was like, okay, I could definitely do this. So I started writing the story and I got invested really quickly. I remember finishing it in just one day. And then I spent the next several days proofreading my story to make it better. And on the day of the submission, I was asking people about their stories. And my story is fairly short. Like, it's really a short story. And my other classmates had like 20-page stories and like 30-page stories. And I started panicking. I was like, oh no, I wrote such a short story. But I was like, it's okay. I have to push through. Like, I worked really hard on this. I was really surprised when Ma'am Joyce said that she liked my story. I was very surprised, but I was also very happy. So when we look at my story, my take is on the perspective of of the criminal, the bad person, or the villain. Yeah, the villain. Because I think a lot of stories focus a lot on the victims, and while that's really important, I really wanted to look at my story from a different perspective, where my main character is actually a mother and she has several children and she's also from a poor family. And so in a sense, my story, as you continue to read it, you start to understand like her thought process and the fact that she's not just a villain in the story, but you start to feel some sort of empathy because she was in a sense a victim and mostly victimized by the system, the government, the corrupt government system that, led to all the killings and everything. And towards the end of the story, you start to really see who the real villain is. And I'm not going to say who that is, but I don't want to spoil it, but you'll get there.
Yeah, when Cyan and Joyce paired us up to be mentor-mentee, I found your story very interesting because, again, your story was from the perspective of an assassin. That's why even my response piece, I think we both wanted to do that, where we wanted to put the readers into the point of view of someone from the other side of this issue, so that we can try to really make conversation about it. Now, after the whole 3 years of us revising, writing, all that, has this project influenced you in making some of your life choices now that you've graduated?
Um, when I okay, so I'm currently in my first year of law school. So when I was in college, I was very like iffy about whether or not I should pursue law school because seemed really hard. So I was like, I don't know if I should do that. So I was very iffy about it. But then the process of writing the story, like it opened up my view. Like it showed me a lot more about what was happening because it forced me to do my research and to really look at all the different perspectives. And that's when I realized that in order for me to be able to create some sort of difference or to contribute something, I needed to pick a career that I could dedicate, that I could, kind of do something with that career, like even in the future when I get older. And so I felt like for me, the best career for that was the law, because the law is everywhere. And as you know, like the extrajudicial killings, they're not very legal, So I wanted to do something in order to create that change from within the system.
Great. Yeah. I mean, just with us talking about you being in law school, I remember you mentioned one of the aspects of law that you found very interesting was like family law, like you mentioned before.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting because when your story was first written, it was a solo. I remember it's just one assassin by himself, and it was a guy. And then later on, you changed it to be a mother, and I found it very interesting that did that sort of inform what do you call this? What you were interested in law school later on?
It did. I actually didn't want to do family law. Like, it didn't really intrigue me. But for my story, you start to see the mother and how far she would go to protect her children, especially from a system that hasn't been very fair to them. So you get a perspective of a mother's love. And in family law, it talks about the rights of the children and the rights of the mother and the families, and that was very intriguing for me. So
yeah. So, well, Kat, we don't have a video of you reading from your story, mainly because your story is very short. It's one of the shortest stories. Ironically, you have the shortest story, and I have the longest story in the book. But instead, what we have, because mentorship is a big part of our project. Kat and I would also, even during the pandemic, we were still editing, revising via Google Meet, via Zoom. So what we're going to share right now is a clip of me and Kat working on her story. So it'll give you a little glimpse of what her story is about. It shows a part where, just to introduce it, Kat was having some trouble, I think, there's a particular scene where we couldn't figure out the logistics of it. So I suggested, hey, why don't we draw it out and then let's try to figure out the scene. So this is Kat and I trying to work through her story using Adobe Photoshop.
All right. So this is that's the layout. Where do the mom and the boyfriend start out scoping? Here.
Yeah, on the other side of the street.
Yeah, so they're here, right?
Like less suspicious.
Yeah. So they start out 3 p.m., diba? 3 p.m. is when they start out here. Does the shot, do they stay there and they do the shot from here? So the window is here in the front? Or do they move somewhere else and then try to picture? Because from here, it's a kind of far shot because you're basically going to have to shoot them through this window.
Yeah.
Or are they moving like somewhere? They decide to move like here? Or did they move like here between the houses and then try to shoot from here? Is that the...
Yeah, I think they scout there first for a bit, maybe an hour or two, to like they're talking it out whether or not if there's like a clear shot at that point.
Yeah.
Because if they start at 3, then the family isn't at the dinner place yet.
That's
like
right.
In the kitchen. Right. So they'd be like elsewhere. So as the family moves, I would assume that they're also trying to move to figure out where the family is. And they kind of just end up wherever they are because that's when they gain the confidence to like shoot. So they're kind of just moving about for a couple of hours, just kind of following the family.
Okay. So
Yeah.
given that, so imagine like so your first paragraph siguro, you can have them when they're scoping, and so you have them in this area up here. Right. So they're up here in this area. This is like where the first few paragraphs take place, right? So
Yes.
they're scoping out, trying to figure out things. So when it's nighttime and they're about to do the actual shooting,
Yeah.
so they're going to move to a different position. They've already figured out, okay, we know now the ideal position. So maybe the paragraph that we're missing is, while they're scoping out, what's the result of them scoping out? So like maybe have the mom say, okay, so after sitting here for a few hours, there are many, their car, so have her describe the place. But the reason why she's describing it, maybe she's talking to her boyfriend. Also, their cars here, we can hide there. If something happens, make sure the motorcycle is here. Like there's some we mentioned a getaway motorcycle. So where are they going to place that? So like right now, it's here across the street. So are they going to, like after they fire, are they planning to run back across the street and go to it and get away? Or are they going to move the motorcycle here? So like them planning this out, if you add a paragraph of them planning out, okay, this is what we're going to do while we're flying across the street. That also gives your reader an idea of, this is what the scene looks like.
Okay. That's nice. That's good.
So it gives you an excuse. That's why her planning, the nice thing about your concept is that because she's the strategist, her planning out, okay, this is how we're going to, this is where we position ourselves, this is where they're going to be. It also gives you an excuse to describe the scene to the reader while it's seeming natural. Because, of course, she has to describe it. She has to explain the scene to her boyfriend because we're planning out logistics. We're planning out the plan. But the nice side effect is that the reader also gets clued in. Oh, yeah, there are cars here. There's stuff here. This is stuff you have to watch out for.
And at the same time, it kind of gives the readers more of a look into the character of the boyfriend. Since you're going to be talking.
Right.
Yeah. That's great.
Like,
okay.
You can have, because you can add to the dynamic where she's very detailed, explain everything. He's like, what? Oh, okay, sige, whatever. Like he's not paying attention. Like he's so, okay, sure. So she could be very like, okay, are you listening to me? There's a thing. There's a. What were you planning to put the motorcycle? What? You didn't think of this? Why didn't you put it there?
All right, so that was me and Kat during one of our sessions where we were planning out how to do our story. So as you can see, this whole process, I think for me, Kat, and I'd like to speak. I think for the other student authors, other mentors, this was a real learning experience for all of us. Not just I think for the students, even me as a mentor, and I'd like to speak for all the other mentors. I think we all learned something also, from our student authors. This is a conversation between generations where we're trying to see also each other's perspectives on this, not just on writing, but on the issue itself, So, the other thing I think about this project is that while it is a conversation between the different generations of writers, where we're trying to process, we're trying to understand, we're trying to express our feelings about this whole issue. I think the one thing that Joyce, Cyan, what they really want to do with this project was, it should not just be a expression of something. It should actually be something of service. It should be something that actually helps those who are affected by this issue, and many of our student authors really felt strongly about this also. And I think that's also why even, years later, even though they really got a grade for the project, they would still show up for all the activities, still do the edits, still, join events like this with us. And even now, help contribute to some of the beneficiaries of this book. That's why for us, we hope that you can all support our book, because all the proceeds of our book are going to will be going to the EJK Orphans Project of the Diocese of Kalookan. And we have, I hope you don't mind, we have here one of the people who heads this project, Sister May. Hi, Sister May. Can we speak to you about your project?
Yeah. So, good evening to everyone.
And I would like to thank you for inviting me here during the launching of your book, Triggered. And the brief story about our ministry. So we know that the war on drugs started 2016, and then I was assigned in the Caritas Kalookan 2018, and we know that there were many people were being killed, and many widows and orphans left. And just want to quote Isaiah chapter 1:17, learn to do good and seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and please the widow's cause. So many people were killed by the unidentified, those riding in tandem, and so forth. And Bishop Pablo Virgilio David has a big heart and very compassionate to the poor, especially those who were victims of injustices. So he supported families. And when I started my ministry in the Diocese of Kalookan, under Caritas Kalookan, I was assigned there. And then I started immersing myself to the different victims. I recalled my experiences because it's like we have a mission, we have partners, the night crawlers. They will give the names of the victims. And then the following day, I will visit the family, the victims. And usually, makikita na kung saan pa nga pinatay eh. May dugo pa. And then, I will hear the stories of the orphans and the widows. Talagang makikita mo, talagang magigigil ka, nakakalungkot. So sad when I witness the stories or on how they killed them. Sometimes I could not sleep because of the tragic stories. Imagine in one house there were 3 men who were being killed, and they were just eating their breakfast, or 5 in the morning, group of people climbed the windows, and then they asked the members of the families to go get inside in the one room, and then they killed one by one. It's so sudden and very tragic stories. And then we know that from the Article 2 of Human Rights Act, it says right to life, equality, and human rights. This means that nobody, including the government, can try to end your life. No one can take your or our life. So, nakakalungkot talaga, no? Yung many people were victims of this war on drugs. Others are connected with drugs, but others, they are innocent. They are very simple people, breadwinner. And then suddenly, they will kill them. And then the women or yung mga balo, the widows and the children, nakakaawa sila. Some are babies, it's still 1 month old, 1 year old, gano'n. So talagang nakakaawa kapag narinig mo yung talagang real story ng mga taong ito, ang mga biktima. And so we started our program with them. We give them burial assistance. We help them with their burial assistance, medical assistance, scholarship program.
Oh, sorry. It looks like there's a little bit of technical difficulties with Sister May. But yeah, just to continue what Sister May was saying, what the EJK orphans, when Joyce and I met with her a few weeks ago, she was explaining that what their project does is they provide educational assistance, financial assistance, also to the children and the widows of EJK victims. And even mentioning even burial assistance.
Yeah, so I would like to extend our gratitude to all of you, the professors, Sirs Jamie, Ma'am Shian, Joyce, the writers, the illustrators, and all of you who have been part of this book. And in behalf of Bishop Ambo and the Diocese of Kalookan, would like to extend our gratitude for your support to our students. In fact, we started like around 7 students, and now this year we have around 57, 57 students. So from college to grade school. So your support will be of great help in their studies, and we know that education is very important. So education, so that the people they will these children they will become better citizens. They can get a better paid job, and shows the difference between good and bad. So I hope the students can continue or can finish their studies so that they will have a better future. And rest assured of our prayers, you are always included in our prayers. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister May. And thank you also for allowing us to help you with this very worthwhile project that you're working on. So again, for all of you who are watching us right now, if you do support our book, all the proceeds of our book will go to the EJK Orphans Project of Sister May and Bishop Ambo. Right now, even though the book is going to be released next week, it's available for pre-order now. It'll be available for start delivering out for those who did pre-orders next week. But even then, we've already given an advance to Sister May on behalf of the whole team. So right now, so I want to congratulate all the writers, illustrators, the editors, the mentors on this project. All the hard work you've been doing the last few years, it's already making a difference. And I do hope that, the spirit of mentorship we have, as Sister May said, it does spread to their students so they also can have an opportunity to improve their lives, So again, thank you so much, Sister May, for giving us the opportunity to be of service to the children and the widows that you work so hard to help. So for the last part of our program, we'd like to open up the floor for any questions from anybody who's here. So there in the chat right now, you can see how you can pre-order our book. It's at chambershell.com/triggered. So you can look in the chat. There's a link there where you can do pre-orders for the book. The book costs 450 pesos plus shipping to anywhere in the Philippines. So that's chambershell.com/triggered. The book should be arriving next week from the press, and we start shipping already. So just in time for Christmas, you want to give them out as a Christmas gift. You can say that this Christmas gift is helping the EJK orphans and widows also. So it's a gift done in your behalf. So now I'd like to open the floor to anyone who'd like to ask questions to any of the student authors, the editors, or any of the mentors who are here, like me and Tin are here. If you have a question, please, you can ask it in the chat, or you can raise your hands using the reaction buttons here in Zoom, and we'll call you up. So does anybody have any question? All right, so here's everybody who's here. So we have Cyan, Joyce, Sister May's here, Pat, Sam, and Kat. So if anyone has a question, you could raise your hand. You have a question about the book, the process, the stories, or about the EJK orphans. So from Shirin Devia, congratulations. Thank you very much. Here in the chat. So maybe let me ask, I have a question for the student authors or the graduate authors now. So do you guys, has this whole project opened up, now that you found, I think, whether it's a hidden talent or desire to write, do you imagine yourselves writing more stories in the future, even though like Joy said, you guys are not literary majors, you're not planning to be authors as your careers later on, but are any of you guys planning to write more stories? I'll ask, let's say Sam. It's like last, sorry, it's like last teacher. Oh, Sam froze. How about, let's wait for Sam to know. Pat, how about you?
I'm not super sure if I want to write more creative short stories. I find it harder for me to go through that, but I still write daily, like more on my life, which I feel like I want to do in the future, also like more personal things.
Great. Sam, well, you're back. How about you, Sam?
For me, like I mentioned, I've always loved writing, but I haven't been able to write much lately. So I've been more into reading, trying to see different ways people write, what makes a good story, and how to write one better. So I've been involved in more reading, which has been great to get back into. And definitely in the future, this made me feel that it's possible to really put your work out there, to hopefully be able to do something with it also, and be able to serve people through it. So definitely something that I would love to keep pursuing if that opportunity would present itself in the future.
Great. Good. How about you, Kat?
I like writing. I really do, but for this story, this was my first and last short story, like ever. I find it difficult to write short stories because it takes up a lot of energy, because you have to keep imagining, and there's a lot of scenes, and it's a little difficult. Although I would like to pursue writing more. I think I would prefer to do poetry, actually. I like writing poetry. I've been writing poetry since I was in high school. So I enjoy poetry a lot more than I do short stories. So if I were to pursue writing, I would do it writing poetry as opposed to short stories.
But that's nice, yeah. So yeah, doing poetry. I remember, I think si Tin was saying that you might have a project where you can do poetry about the law. Since you're taking law school, that might be something, maybe a future project we can all do together. So any other question? Anyone else from the audience? Any questions? If none, I'd like to ask, maybe to wrap up, I'd like to ask the two editors, Joyce and Cyan. So what do you guys hope will, come out of this, now that the book's finally coming out? What do you hope will come out of this project moving forward?
I have to say, I actually wasn't expecting it to be this big already. So everything that happened has been a gift, I think. This little community we have shared, the 4 years. I mean, who would have thought it would have gone 4 years? The intervention of Areté, all the people who just contributed, even financially, for this project. So I think I have the impression after our meeting that I hope it would trigger other conversations as well. But I really hope we can continue this little community in a more informal way, but really meet the kids and the widows in Kalookan. It would be great if Ateneo is always saying, let's go down from the hill. And this project really was like going down from the hill, from a classroom thing, from literature to the streets, really. And this dialogue, intergenerational dialogue, has been great. And for me, it's really a testimony also to see that, as Jamie has been saying, how art can respond, and also that literature can actually do something, and freshmen non-lit people can publish also is a big thing, and maybe teachers and high school seniors also can may have an inspiration from what all of you have contributed. Yeah.
Sister May, yes, you wanted to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to that this day, this morning, the children of the EJK families, they had their art therapy. So it was the what do you call it, the salinlahi, where the one who gave the salinlahi, it's like a chat. They facilitated giving theater arts, and they drove also. So I was struck by one kid because he drove police station, and then there is their house, and then at the middle his father was killed. Yeah. So they draw it yung like the blood, you know. So they express their anger, and it's a therapy for them. So there was a plan that they will make up cards for them for the for all the products or for the end products of the children this day. So it was a whole day for them. So thank you.
Thanks, Sister May. Cyan, yeah, any last words for us?
Who knew? I've been publishing just a few books, right, for myself, and I never thought you could publish a book in this way, in a more roundabout way. But it's really when I realized that writing a book and publishing a book is a communal experience and not just something that you do by yourself. This was the first time I realized that, and creating a book takes a whole community. So that was interesting, and I think it can be, like Joy said, a template for teachers also who could do this with their students, and maybe write their own books. And anyway, there's online publishing too.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of online publishing, for those who it's the print book, which will be releasing next week, so it's available for purchase this December for Christmas. In January 2022, we will be releasing also the book in digital form. So for those who maybe if you're abroad and you want to access our book because shipping is kind of far, we are going to make the book also available via digital formats like ebook in Amazon. So we'll for those who are interested, please check out our website again at www.chambershell.com/triggered. We'll have updates there. Right now, so it's just available on print this coming month, but then we will have a rollout for digital because, of course, we want the stories to spread as far as we can. And again, even on digital, actually there, because there's no printing cost. So all the proceeds of that will go to the EJK Orphans Project of Sister May and Bishop Ambo. So there, guys, just to wrap up our event today, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'd like to thank Areté, especially Carlo and Van, for helping us host this event, for doing such an amazing job. I'd like to thank the mentors with me here, like Tin, of course, Joyce and Cyan. I'd like to thank our student authors who are here, Sam, Kat, and Pat. And thank you to all. I can see some of my team from, I'd like to, by the way, shout out to my team from Chambershell. I see that Jessa and I think Danica are here. Danica, by the way, is my author. So if you can see our beautiful cover, Danica is the artist who came up with our fantastic cover. So big shout out to Danica Cuevas for the amazing job she did laying out and designing our cover. So everyone, thank you so much. So again, if you want to order our book, it's available now at www.chambershell.com/triggered. The book costs 450 pesos plus shipping. So we ship anywhere in the Philippines. Also, again, so next year it will be available on digital formats next year. So before we end, can we take a Carla? Can we do like a photo, a screenshot of everyone who's here? Or okay, let's do a screenshot. Okay, ready? We'll do the screenshot. Carla, at you. Sorry. Okay, ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Smile, everyone. Okay, wait, one more. Sorry. Okay. So guys, thank you so much. I thank you so much for being part of this. I do hope you support our book. I do hope you support the EJK Orphans Project of Sister May. And again, if our stories and this project somehow inspires you to be able to create your own art as well, to be able to mentor, to teach, to converse with fellow artists, I hope you do continue to do that. One thing we want to do is use our art, use our stories, our writing to change the culture here in the Philippines, to return it to one of empathy, of caring, of valuing life. And this book is our small way of doing that. So thank you so much for joining us, and everyone stay safe and have a very good evening.